Johnny Cash sat by June's deathbed for 4 straight days, holding her hand and whispering something only she could hear. When she died, Johnny died with her. This is what he said. May 11th, 2003. Baptist Hospital, Nashville, Tennessee. June Carter Cash had been fighting complications from heart surgery for days, but everyone who loved her knew the truth. The woman who had saved Johnny Cash from himself, who had pulled him back from the edge of destruction more times than anyone could count, was dying. And Johnny Cash, the man in black who had faced down prison riots, record executives, and his own demons, was about to face the one thing he couldn't fight: losing the love of his life. To understand the magnitude of what happened in that hospital room, you need to understand what June Carter meant to Johnny Cash. She wasn't just his wife. She wasn't just his singing partner. She wasn't just the mother of his son, John Carter Cash. June was Johnny's salvation, his anchor, his reason for living. Without June Carter, there would have been no Johnny Cash comeback. Without June, there would have been no American recordings. Without June, Johnny would have died decades earlier, overdosed in some forgotten hotel room, another country music casualty. But June Carter didn't just save Johnny Cash the performer. She saved Johnny Cash the man. They met in 1956, backstage at the Grand Ole Opry. Johnny was 24, married to Vivian Liberto, and already showing signs of the demons that would nearly destroy him. June was 26, part of the legendary Carter family, country music royalty, with a voice like an angel and a spirit that could light up any room she entered. The attraction was immediate, electric, and completely inappropriate. They were both married. They were both struggling with their own battles. But when June Carter and Johnny Cash looked at each other that night in 1956, something clicked into place that would define both of their lives for the next 47 years. The early years of their relationship were a mess of addiction, infidelity, and heartbreak. Johnny's marriage to Vivian crumbled under the weight of his pill addiction and his obvious feelings for June. June's marriage to Carl Smith, and later to Rip Nix, suffered as she watched Johnny slowly destroy himself with drugs and alcohol. But through it all, June never gave up on him. When Johnny would disappear for days, strung out on amphetamines and barbiturates, June would find him and bring him home. When he would collapse on stage, incoherent and dangerous, June would be there to pick up the pieces. When everyone else in Nashville had written Johnny Cash off as a hopeless addict, June Carter still believed in the man she saw underneath all the pain and pills. In 1967, after years of dancing around their feelings, Johnny and June finally married. It was a union that saved both of their lives. June gave Johnny stability, love, and a reason to get clean. Johnny gave June a purpose, a mission, and a love story for the ages. Together, they created some of the most beautiful music ever recorded. It Ain't Me, Babe, Jackson, Help Me Make It Through the Night. But more importantly, they created a partnership that would endure through addiction, recovery, career highs and lows, and 35 years of marriage that was equal parts passion and devotion. Johnny often said that June had saved his life. But those who knew them both understood that the salvation went both ways. Johnny gave June a career that transcended her family's legacy. He made her a star in her own right, and he loved her with an intensity that was both beautiful and terrifying to witness. By 2003, Johnny and June were in their 70s. Johnny's health had been declining for years. The diabetes, the broken ribs from a fall, the pneumonia that kept coming back. His body was finally paying the price for decades of abuse. But June had been his constant companion through every hospital stay, every medication change, every dark night of the soul. Then, in May 2003, it was June's turn to be vulnerable. She had gone in for heart valve replacement surgery at Baptist Hospital in Nashville. It was supposed to be routine as open-heart surgery could be for a 73-year-old woman. But complications set in almost immediately. Her heart was weaker than the doctors had anticipated. Her body wasn't responding to treatment the way it should. Within 24 hours of the surgery, it was clear that June Carter Cash was in serious trouble. Johnny arrived at the hospital on May 11th and never left. He moved into June's room, setting up camp in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside her bed. Family members tried to convince him to go home, to rest, to take care of himself. Johnny's response was simple: "I'm not leaving her." For 4 days and 4 nights, Johnny Cash maintained a vigil that would have been exhausting for a man half his age. He held June's hand. He talked to her constantly, even when the doctor said she couldn't hear him. He sang to her their old songs, the songs that had made them famous, the songs that told the story of their love. June drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes recognizing Johnny, sometimes lost in the medication and the trauma her body was enduring. But Johnny never wavered. He was determined that if June was going to die, she wouldn't die alone. She wouldn't die without knowing how much she was loved. The family gathered on May 14th. John Carter Cash, Johnny's son with June, flew in from California. Carlene Carter, June's daughter, was there. Roseanne Cash, Johnny's daughter from his first marriage, came to pay her respects to the woman who had been more of a mother to her than Vivian had ever been. The room was full of people who loved June, but Johnny never left his post by her bedside. Dr. William Anderson, June's physician, knew that the end was near. June's kidneys were failing. Her heart was barely functioning. The machines were keeping her alive, but her body was shutting down. On the morning of May 15th, Dr. Anderson took Johnny aside. "Mr. Cash, you need to prepare yourself. June doesn't have much time left." Johnny nodded. His face was calm, but his hands were shaking. "How long?" "Hours, maybe less." Johnny walked back to June's bedside. The family was gathered around, but Johnny asked for a moment alone with his wife. They reluctantly agreed, stepping out into the hallway to give Johnny and June the privacy they deserved. What happened in those final moments became family legend. Johnny leaned close to June's ear and began to whisper. Those who stood outside the room could hear the murmur of his voice but couldn't make out the words. Johnny spoke to June for nearly 10 minutes, his voice soft but urgent, as if he was trying to download 35 years of love and gratitude into her failing consciousness. Then, at exactly 2:11 p.m. on May 15, 2003, June Carter Cash took her last breath. Johnny was holding her hand. He felt the moment her spirit left her body. And according to everyone who witnessed it, something in Johnny Cash died at that exact moment as well. The days following June's death were a blur of funeral arrangements, media attention, and overwhelming grief. Johnny moved through it all like a ghost. He spoke at June's funeral, but his voice was hollow, mechanical. He sang, "Will the circle be unbroken with the Carter family?" But the light had gone out of his eyes. Roseanne Cash later described her father during this period as a walking wounded man. She said, "It was like watching someone bleed to death in slow motion." Dad was physically present, but spiritually, he had gone with June. Johnny tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. He went through the motions of living. He ate when people reminded him to eat. He took his medications. He even talked about recording again. But anyone who knew him could see that Johnny Cash was dying of a broken heart. The family was particularly worried about Johnny's increasingly frequent references to joining June. He would sit in his favorite chair and stare at her picture for hours. He would have conversations with her as if she was still in the room. Most disturbingly, he began talking about death as a reunion, rather than an ending. John Carter Cash tried desperately to keep his father engaged with life. He brought grandchildren to visit. He played Johnny's old records. He even convinced Johnny to go into the studio one more time, hoping that music might pull him back from the edge. But Johnny was beyond rescue. June had been his lifeline for so long that without her, he simply didn't know how to exist. He had fought addiction, poverty, industry rejection, and countless personal demons. But he couldn't fight the loneliness that consumed him after June died. On September 12, 2003, just 4 months after June's death, Johnny Cash died at Baptist Hospital in Nashville, the same hospital where he had said goodbye to June. The official cause of death was complications from diabetes. But everyone who loved him knew the real cause. Johnny Cash had died of a broken heart. But the story doesn't end with Johnny's death. It ends with what the family learned about those final moments in June's hospital room, the whispered conversation that only Johnny and June had shared. A week after Johnny's funeral, John Carter was going through his father's personal belongings when he found a note, written in Johnny's shaky handwriting, dated May 15th, 2003. The note was titled, "What I Told June." In the note, Johnny had written down exactly what he had whispered to his dying wife during those final 10 minutes. The contents of that note have never been made public, but family members who have read it describe it as the most beautiful love letter ever written, a final accounting of 47 years of partnership, passion, and devotion. According to Roseanne Cash, the note contained Johnny's promises to June about how he would live without her, his gratitude for everything she had done for him, and his certainty that they would be reunited soon. But most importantly, it contained Johnny's confession that he had never been afraid of death, but had been terrified of living without her. The note ended with a line that has become family legend. "I told her I would follow her anywhere, even to death, and I meant it." Johnny Cash kept his promise. He followed June Carter Cash to whatever lies beyond this life, just 4 months after she took her last breath. Some called it tragedy. Others called it the most romantic gesture in the history of country music. But for those who knew Johnny and June, it wasn't surprising at all. They had lived as one soul in two bodies. When June died, half of Johnny died with her. The remaining half simply couldn't survive for long. The vigil Johnny kept by June's deathbed wasn't just about saying goodbye. It was about making sure that the woman who had saved his life knew how much she was loved, how grateful he was for every moment they had shared, and how completely lost he would be without her. In those 96 hours at Baptist Hospital, Johnny Cash proved that real love doesn't end with death. It transcends it. June Carter Cash had spent 47 years saving Johnny's life. In her final moments, he returned the favor by making sure she didn't face death alone. And when Johnny died 4 months later, those who loved them both felt a strange sense of peace. Johnny and June were together again, somewhere beyond the reach of diabetes and heart disease, and the inevitable loneliness of being the one left behind. The greatest love story in country music had ended the only way it could, with two people who couldn't imagine existing without each other choosing not to. Johnny Cash sat by June's deathbed for 4 straight days, whispering words of love and gratitude that only she could hear. When she died, he died with her. And in the end, that wasn't tragic. It was beautiful. Some love stories are meant to last forever. Johnny and June proved that some do.